Let us start with wages now. In the earlier class we have completed with rent. Now we shall be starting with wages. Now what do you mean by wages? So wages means anything that we pay to our laborers for the purpose of providing services by them. So let us understand more and in detail about wages. The term wages means payments made for the services of labor. A wage payment is essentially a price paid for a particular commodity, namely labor services. There is no doubt and labor has particularity of its own which differentiate it from other commodities. Yet like a commodity, labor is bought and sold. Labor participates in an exchange relationship, that is the worker gives his time or labor and in exchange gets money, including some fringe benefits if any. Wages and salary. Economists make a small differentiation between wage and salary. Wage is the price of labor and salary as that of organization. In accounting, however, the difference is made by making wages as direct expense and salary as indirect expense. Wage usually refers to payment to unskilled labor, while salary is a payment of skilled labor. Most labor markets are differentiated on the basis of kinds of skills and training required in labor. So the difference between the wages and salary is that wages are paid to the laborer for the services they provide, and salary is provided to the skilled labor, that is people who are skilled and people who have the knowledge of certain areas. For example, chartered accountants who are working with companies are paid salary, and wages are paid to the laborers, that is they are paid on day-to-day basis. For unskilled people, that is they are not skilled in a particular thing but they are working. So this is the difference between wages and salary. Now let us study about minimum wage. A typical example of a price floor is the minimum wage. Minimum wage law dictate the lowest price for labor that any employer may pay. The minimum wages law ensures workers a minimally adequate standard of living. To understand the effects of a minimum wage, we can consider the market for labor. So we can understand that minimum wages can be calculated. Now how minimum wages are calculated, and let us understand from the above figure and the explanation. How minimum wage affects the labor market. Panel A of figure 4.14 shows the labor market, which like all markets is subject to the forces of demand and supply. Workers determine the supply of labor and firms determine the demand. If the government does not intervene, the wage normally adjusts to balance labor supply and labor demand. Panel B, figure 4.14 shows the labor market with a minimum wage. If the minimum wage is above the equilibrium level, the quantity of labor supplied exceeds the quantity demanded. This results in unemployment. Thus, the minimum wage raises incomes of these workers and workers who have jobs, but it lowers the income of workers who cannot find jobs. However, it has to be kept in mind that the economy contains not a single labor market but many labor markets for different types of workers. The impact of the minimum wage depends on the skill and experience of the worker. Experienced workers with high skills are not affected because their equilibrium wages are above the minimum. The minimum wage is not binding on such workers. The minimum wages has its greatest impact on unskilled and least experienced labor. The equilibrium wages are low. In addition to altering the quantity of such labor demanded, the minimum wage also alters the quantity supplied because the minimum wage rises and the wage that such workers can earn. It increases the number of such workers who choose to look for jobs. The minimum wage is often a topic of debate. Proponents of the minimum wage view the policy as one way to raise the income of the working poor. They correctly point out that workers who earn the minimum wage can afford only a much standard of living. Many of the proponents also admit that it has some adverse effects, including unemployment. However, they believe that these effects are small, and that all things considered, a higher minimum wage makes the poor better off. Those opposing the minimum wage contain that it is not the best way to combat poverty. They are of the view that minimum wage causes unemployment. If there were no minimum wage laws, some workers who currently cannot find any firm willing to hire them at the minimum wage as per law would be able to find unemployment at a lower wage. But at the same time, it has to be kept in the mind that those workers who still have jobs benefit from the minimum wage because they are paid a higher wage than they otherwise would be. In other words, minimum wage law creates both losers, workers who become unemployed and the firms have to pay higher wages, and winners, the workers who receive higher wages. India introduced the Minimum Wages Act in 1948, and it has been amended from time to time. Money wages or nominal wages are the wages paid or received in terms of money per hour, per day, per week, and so forth. But money wages alone may not give us a correct idea of what a worker really earns from his work. For this, real wages have to be considered. Real wages are the quantity of goods and services which one can obtain with his money wages. Real wages are purchasing power of money wages. In order to ascertain real wages, the following factors have to be taken into consideration. First is purchasing power of money. The purchasing power of money varies inversely with price level, that is, higher the price is, lower the purchasing power of money, and vice versa. Subsidiary earnings. In addition to the regular money wage, an employee has extra earnings in the form of money or goods, example, housing benefits, traveling allowance, etc. This also adds to his purchasing power or real wages. So, as we know, minimum wages means minimum how much an employee has to be paid. This is decided under the Minimum Wages Act. And under this act, the nominal wages which are to be paid for a worker, suppose they are paid on day-to-day basis. So, how much a worker should be paid on day-to-day basis? If a person is working on monthly basis, how much he should be paid for per month? In such a way that his basic necessities are being satisfied properly. Then what are real wages? Real wages means wages which are given not only in money but also purchasing power of money wages. Then a certain real wages, that is the factors which are considered, and the purchasing power of money, then subsidiary earnings and extra work without extra payment. Then next, regularity or irregularity of employment. Regular or more secure employments may give lower money wages, but the real wages might be higher. On the other hand, irregular and insecure employments may give high money wages, but the real wages may be lower. Conditions of work. Some occupations are higher than others, and in some of the hours of work are shorter than in others. All this has to be taken into account in estimating a person's real income. So, the real income is considered on basis of different factors. Then future prospects. A low money income will be considered a high real wage if there are good prospects of a rise in the future. So, depending upon the nature of work and depending upon the conditions of work, the income is being decided. Then next we have subsistence wages. If they are wages that provide only the bare necessities of life. It is the lowest wage upon which a worker or his or her family can survive. The subsistence theories of wages, oriented in the physiocratic school of France in 18th century, emphasized the supply of side the labor market. They hold the change in the supply of labor is the main force that derives real wages to the minimum required for subsistence. Basic needs such as food, clothing, and shelter to maintain existence. Adam Smith referred to elements of subsistence theory in his book The Wealth of Nations, where he held that the wages paid to workers had to be enough to allow them to live and to support their families. Following Adam Smith, other classical economists such as David Ricardo and Thomas Malthus also held a similar outlook. Ricardo subscribed to the view that the natural price of labor was simply the price theory or price necessary to enable the laborers to subsist and to perpetuate the race. Ricardo's view was in tune with the Malthusian theory of population, which held that population adjusts to the means of supporting it. Subsistence theorists argued that the market price of labor would not vary from the natural price for long. If wages rose above subsistence, the number of workers would increase and bring the wage rates down. If wages fell below subsistence, the number of workers would decrease and push the wage rates up. During the 18th century, when these economists wrote, most workers were actually living near the subsistence level, and population appeared to be trying to outpace the means of subsistence. Thus, the subsistence theory seemed to fit the fact. Later, writers were much more pessimistic about the prospects for wage earners. In their inflexible conclusion that wages would always be driven down on the subsistence theory, the name Iron Law of Wages. Then next we have fair wages. They are minimum wage rates for specific occasions, specific occupations. They must be paid for by contractors doing work for governments with fair wage policy. These policies generally apply to construction traders and sometimes cleaning and security workers and are often tied to union wage rates. They are intended to ensure contractors pay decent wages on government contracts instead of slashing wages and benefits. A fair wage is something more than the minimum wages. Fair wage is a mean between the living wage and the minimum wage. Living wage is the wage sufficient to ensure the workman and his family food, shelter, clothing, frugal comfort, provision for contingencies against ill health, education for children, and measures of insurance against the old age. While the lower limit of their fair wage is the minimum wage, the upper limit is the capacity of the industry to pay fair wage in reasonable comparison with the average payment of similar tasks in other trades or occupations requiring the same amount of ability. Fair wage depends on the present economic position as well as future prospects. Thus, fair wages depends upon the following factors: minimum wages, capacity of industry to pay prevailing rates of wages in the same or similar occupations in the same or neighboring localities, productivity of labor, level of national income and its distribution, the place of the industry in the economy of the country. Hence, it is a wage that is reasonable for the type of work done. It is an adjustable step that moves up according to the capacity of the industry to pay and the prevailing wage rates in the area of industry. So, fair wages. What do you mean by fair wages? Fair wages means these are generally applied to the construction traders and sometimes cleaning and security workers, and they are often tied up with the union wage rates, and they are intended to ensure contractors to pay decent wages. So on government contracts instead of slashing wages and benefits. So their wages depend upon minimum wages, then their capacity of the industry to pay, then prevailing rates, that is what is the market rate depending upon the occupations and productivity in the neighboring localities, then productivity of labor, level of national income and its distribution. So there are various factors which are to be considered when we consider fair wages. So minimum wages and fair wages are calculated depending upon the factors of production. Now let us understand what is the modern theory of wages. Although labor has certain peculiarities and cannot be regarded as an ordinary commodity, the still wages are very largely determined by the interaction of the forces of demand and supply as in the case of an ordinary commodity. Demand for labor. The demand for labor reflects partly labor's productivity and partly the market value of the product at different levels of production. The demand for labor is determined by the nature of demand for the product of labor, Thus, the demand for labor is a derived demand. The proportion of the cost of labor to the total cost of product, its substantiability by other factors. Supply of capital as determined by the ability and willingness of investors to save and invest. After considering all the above factors, the employer is governed by one fundamental factor, namely marginal productivity. The wages that he will pay to the labor, the marginal unit of labor, will be equal to the value of the additional product or marginal productivity. But since all the labor units are homogeneous, what is paid to the marginal worker will be paid to all the laborers. The change in the wage rate determines the direction of change in the demand for labor. But the degree of this change depends on the elasticity of demand for labor. Whether the demand for labor is elastic or not will depend on technical conditions of production and elasticity of demand for a commodity which the labor produces. Generally, the short-term demand for labor is less elastic than the long-term demand. That is why the employers and the trade unions adopt a stiff attitude in wage negotiation. It is important to remember that it is the demand of the entire industry, not an individual firm, which determines wages in the market. The individual firm has to accept the market rate of wages and adjust to its own demand for labor accordingly. The demand curve of the industry is derived from the lateral summation of the demand curves of individual firms. So now demand for labor. So as the industry or as an industry is set up, the demand for labor will be required, and labor is such a thing that it cannot be stored. It is a factor which has to be used in day-to-day basis. So we can say that labor is an inevitable factor of an industry or for a production process. Then supply of labor. The supply of labor means the number of hours of a given type of labor which will be offered for hire at different wage rates. Usually, the relationship between the price of labor, wages, and the total amount of labor supplied in the market is a direct one. That is, a greater quantity of labor is offered at rising wage levels. Hence, supply curve of labor slopes upwards from left to right. The supply of labor depends on a number of factors like the rate of population growth, the age and distribution of population, working hours, labor laws regarding the employment of child and women labor, the attitude of labor in general towards work and leisure, the mobility of labor. The mobility of labor determines the elasticity of supply of labor. If labor is mobile, its supply will be elastic. That is, a small rise in the wage rate of this type of labor will attract a large number of workers from other occupations, and a small fall in the wage rate will lead to an outflow of workers to other occupations. If labor is less mobile between occupations, its supply will be elastic. That is, a rise or fall in wages can either attract the workers in particular occupations or drive the workers out of the occupations. An important factor in the supply of labor is the work-leisure ratio, which in turn is affected by changes in the wage rates. The effect of wage rates is of two types: substitution effect and income effect. When wage rate rises, it induces the worker to work more at the cost of leisure. Hence, there is a positive substitution effect in favor of work. But it is also true that the workers prefer leisure to work when their income increases. Therefore, at higher wage rates, they might be willing to work less than before. Here, there is a negative income effect which discourages work and encourages leisure. Therefore, the wage rate rises. There is a positive substitution effect and a negative income effect. At lower wages rates, the positive substitution effect is greater than the negative income effect. Hence, an increase in the wage rate leads to an increase in the supply of labor. But beyond a certain level, high level of wages, the negative income effect is greater than the positive substitution effect. Therefore, an increase in the wage rate leads to a fall in the supply of labor. According to the supply curve of labor, it is not upward sloping throughout its length, but it's backward sloping, showing that beyond a certain wage level, the workers' preference for leisure becomes more dominant against their will to work. This can be illustrated as follows. In the above figure 4.15, it is clear that SS is the backward bending curve, supply curve of labor, which bends backwards at point A. As wage rate rises from OW1 to OW2 to OW3, the supply of labor rises from ON1 to ON2 to ON3. However, any further rise in the wage to say OW4 brings about a fall in supply of ON4. Interaction of demand and supply. The interaction of demand and supply of labor determines the wage level. This is shown in figure 4.16a and 4.16b. So from these figures we can understand the interaction between the demand and supply. How the demand and supply. This is the supply curve, this is the demand curve. How the demand increases but supply remains constant. So we can understand this. From the figure 4.16, we can take the case of an industry. The curve SS represents supply to the industry, and DD is the demand curve. They interact at E. The wage level therefore is OW is equal to EN. Figure 4.16b represents the case of a firm under perfect competition. The firm has to accept the market wage OW settled by the industry above. From the OW level in figure 4.16a, draw a straight line towards figure 4.16b representing the condition of the firm. The extended line AW cuts the MRP curve at the firm at E in figure 4.16b. But at this level, the ARP is MR, which is greater than the wage OW. Hence, all the firms are making supernormal profits at this wage level. This will lead to entry of new firms in the industry. The demand for labor will increase and the wage level will go up. Thus, S&P will be competed away in the long run by the entry of new firms. The new demand curve DD cuts the supply curve SS in figure 4.16a at F. The wage level in this situation will be OW, which is higher than the original wage level OW. This is how the interaction of demand and supply determines the wage. When the wage is OW, the firm is in an equilibrium at point E. And when the wage rises to OW, the equilibrium is at F. At this point, ARP and MRP are equal and the wage average OW is equal to both of them. It can also happen that the occurrence of S&Ps attract some firms from outside which may be further increase the demand for labor to DD. The wage level will then be OW. Here the ARP is less than the wage OW, that is the firms are suffering losses. The result will be that some firms will leave the industry and the wage will come down to the level OW. Here, wage ARP and MRP are all equal. Thus, under perfect competitive conditions, wages are in the long run equal to MRP as well as ARP of labor. So, wages will go on hand in hand with labor, because as the labor is present, the wages shall also be present. Now, exploitation of labor. It is a well-known fact that labor has a weak bargaining power in relation to employer. Hence, exploitation of labor, as defined by Joel Robinson, labor is said to be exploited when the wage is less than the value of the marginal product (VMP), which is equal to the physical product multiplied by the sale price of the product. There can be no exploitation of labor under perfect competition, both in the labor market and in the product market. In this case, price and MR are equal, and labor is paid the wage rate equal to the value of its marginal product. But In other market situation, labor exploitation occurs. There are three types of exploitation. Monopolistic exploitation, when an industrial employer or a group of employers occupy a very strong uh, monopolistic position as compared with labor, it constitutes what it is called monopoly. In mono, the employer embodies in this person concentrated monopoly power of being the sole purchaser of labor, whereas labor occupies a weak position in comparison. The monopsony also occurs when a big employer employs proportionately a very large number of a given type of labor, so that he is in a position to influence the wage rate. It may also occur when a group of big employers come to an understanding not to compete for labors and thus act as a single hirer of labor. In this situation, each worker gets a wage less than MRP. This is the measure of labor exploitation under monopoly. So this is called as sonistic exploitation, Mrs. John Robinson. So in this theory, it is said that there is a monopoly in the market, and hence laborer has to listen to the employer because he is the sole purchaser of the labor. Next, we have monopolistic exploitation. In this case, there is a perfect competition in the labor market. Average and marginal wage curves coincide, but uh, imperfect competition in the product market, that is MR is less than the price of the product, and therefore the MRP is less than the value of the marginal product. In equilibrium, the firm will equate their wages with MRP. This means that the labor is paid less than the value of the marginal product, which shows exploitation. Now, double exploitation. It occurs when there is imperfect competition both the labor market and in the product market. Thus, there is a double exploitation of labor in both monosonistic and monopolistic, and the labor is exploited the most. So, here we can understand how labor is being exploited, or how laborers are being treated or worked in our country. So, with this, we come to the end of labor. Now, in the next class, we shall be starting with collective bargaining.